metal leaves the COMEX ecosystem or leaves the London Metals Exchange ecosystem, the liquidity is severely severed. Because in order to get it back into that system to where you could have industrial liquidity, where Elon Musk says, hey, I'll pay $40 premium for every ounce of silver that people have on 1,000-ounce bars. How many people are going to snap that up like that? Well, if you're outside the ecosystem, you're done. To get it back in, to get it reassayed, it would take a long time and would cost a fortune. So when we see all this metal leaving the COMEX and leaving the London Metals Exchange, which I know we'll touch on here in a moment where it's going, is significant. It's a one-way ticket. That's number one. Number two, the gathering of these countries around the world, whether it be the Belt Road Initiative, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or most relevant to me, the BRICS nations, and all of the countries that are joining together. Here again, we are being misdirected into looking at what the Federal Reserve hasn't done or what they intend to do. We are being misdirected into looking at things like the January 6th committee and all of this noise and all of this nonsense when 80% of the world's population is forming a coalition. And the significance that that's going to have, I think, to the Western world is really topic number one. And I guess to me, this year has been filled with a lot of white noise. And that white noise is very distracting. So look, the biggest money in the world, Kai, is draining the exchanges of precious metals. And there's a lot I could say about that, but that to me has been the most intriguing thing. Everything else around, to me, has been a distraction. And I think that's the path that I choose to follow right now.
Yeah, interesting. Like it's difficult to sort of sort through the weeds and really focus, right? And focus on that. How do you call that? The main piece there, like the physical part. Like for me, as we just mentioned, like there's so much noise, as you said, like the Bank of Japan this morning, like what is happening now with the US dollar, the DXY dipped to 104 this morning. Gold was up a little bit. Silver was up 3.3%, right? But sifting through that, like what does that actually mean? And now we come to the COMEX and L.B.M.A numbers. Let's look at the vaults here, registered versus eligible, right? Like what does that mean? That brings me to the question, because it's a puzzling one for me, and I'm learning, right? Registered versus eligible. Right.
So eligible is an interesting category, right? And I think that certainly bears into the two categories, registered and eligible, are the way that the COMEX categorizes the metal inside the vault. Let me take a step back and try to explain it to you this way. I had a client who placed a very, very large order recently. It was $35 million in 1,000-ounce silver bars. We have a wonderful storage program with Brinks, and we have facilities all around North America. Their biggest bellwether facility is Salt Lake City. And if you know much about the United States, I know you live across the pond, but in the United States, Salt Lake City or Utah would be considered in the center of the country a place where, from a geographic standpoint, would be a good place to store metal. You'll see where I'm going with this. Our facilities in the United States are Los Angeles, Salt Lake City, Miami, and New York City. Of those four facilities, the only COMEX depository is New York City. So with that being said, the client chose or wanted to have the bars stored at Salt Lake City. So I call my contact, who is able to get me 1,000-ounce bars, incredibly competitive and very high up on the food chain. And I said, Rob, client wants to have these sent to Salt Lake City. And the gentleman I speak to has a massive account at Brinks JFK in New York City. And he said, well, the client would be better off storing them in Salt Lake City, in JFK than Salt Lake City, have better liquidity. And I said, well, why is that? I said, I can buy them out of Salt Lake City just as easy as I can out of JFK. He said, true. He said, but you will be pulling it out of COMEX custody. And I said, well, so you're saying that JFK is the only COMEX vault here? That is correct. I said, well, it's being transferred from Brinks the whole way. Brinks will truck it to Salt Lake City. It's in their custody. He says, true that. However, once it leaves the COMEX chain of custody, then it loses its liquidity. Now, the bars that are being held in my account at Brinks JFK, in this client's account at Brinks JFK, who ultimately chose JFK for where I'm going with this, hedge funds at Brinks JFK or pension funds or whoever's holding the metal, those are eligible accounts. That means that the bars are eligible to be put onto the registered category. Registered are the bars that are available for immediate delivery. Now, by the way, as a side note, those in silver, that number, the eligible category has bled down by about 75% since February 2021, or silver squeeze. It was about 140 million ounces in the registered category then, and it's 33 million or so now. Put that in perspective, the country of India will import over 300 million ounces this year of silver, and there's only 33 million ounces backing the price setting mechanism of the West in the eligible category. More enlightening was the admission by the CME group, who is the group in charge of the COMEX, that said, when we post these eligible numbers, you should really decrease that by 50%. So the eligible numbers are somewhere in the neighborhood of, let's say, 300 million ounces. But what they're saying is you should cut that in half to 150 million ounces, because at least half of it ain't for sale. Mine ain't for sale. My clients ain't for sale. A lot of the people who are holding metal inside a facility like Brinks JFK in an eligible category. Yes, it's eligible to be put into registered. And remember, when my client was advised to not move it to Salt Lake City, what it basically means is the bars are assayed, the numbers are written down, the weights are written down, and they're in an eligible category. Like that, they could be moved to registered. If Elon says, I'll pay you $40 an ounce over spot for every 1,000 ounce bar you want to pay me. And people would jump at that. So the point is simply this. We have eligible, we have registered. Registered are the bars that can be delivered. In silver, it's roughly 33 million ounces against a backdrop of demand in the world that right now will exceed 1 billion ounces this year, according to the Silver Institute. We will be in a deficit of somewhere in the neighborhood of, I don't know, 200 million ounces. So when you realize that there's just a tiny, tiny bit of silver held in the registered category in comparison to the amount of demand and or accumulation by countries like India, or an expansion in green and digital applications, something is about to break. And more importantly than all of this is the massive drawdown we are seeing. On the L.B.M.A, they have the lowest amount of silver that they've ever had since they started keeping records. So this is not just centered here in the COMEX. Bottom line is simply this: from the very top on down, the most sophisticated, well-funded and well-informed traders are very quietly exiting stage left. And I want you to understand that when you exit stage left, you have substantially diminished your liquidity, unless you don't care, unless you're just, bye-bye, I'm going somewhere else and I ain't ever looking back. And that's what I want to take away here. That's what I want people to understand. The sophisticated money, the people closest to the information and with the biggest pocketbooks, they're running. And they're doing it before anyone else catches on, because everyone else is being misdirected by the price. And if you don't think that price suppression and misdirection is very pervasive in finance, then you haven't studied enough. And the biggest money in the world is trying to throw everyone else off the scent and keep them from being traded out of what they're trying to do. And that is to reposition outside the dollar into, as Zoltan Pozsar calls it, a new era dominated by commodities. And gold and silver, to me, aren't just commodities, they're money, they're wealth.